Okay, I'm making this video just on nodes as they apply to what we're doing in the CNC world. Nodes are essentially points along a path that define the path's shape. You have corner nodes and smooth nodes, and when you combine those different types of nodes, they come together to form complex shapes. This is just a generic image I've brought in just for the purpose of this discussion. This is one that I found at one of the online free sites, and that's typically the best way to find a nasty file that needs a lot of cleanup. So cleaning and reducing nodes will allow for a cleaner cut file because the machine has less direction changes and points to hit and go from. So you're going to have, on some of your better machines, it's not going to matter if this path here has 30 nodes along it or has 2. It's just going to go from here to here. But there are some machines, some software, that every little point along this path is going to stutter, stop, and you're going to end up with choppy cuts. So the cleaner the file, the better. Every node's a coordinate along this path. So you kind of think of it like a road trip. The less stops you have to make along the way, the less deviations you'll have in your cut, in your path. So I'm just going to use this generic design to discuss the various tools and uses and cover problems and remedies you might need along the way. Okay, so I've got this design I brought in, and I'm going to go to the node editor, which is this here, edit path by nodes tool. And when I come into the node editor, this is going to open up this toolbar here, which are your various node tools. If I come in here, okay, you've got this node here with these 2 handles. This would be what I'm calling a corner node. And this node here, let me see. Now this is actually a corner node, even though it appears smooth. If I select it and I use this, it will make it a smooth node. Then when I pull these handles, it directly affects the handle on the other side because that node is now smooth. So that's one tool there, is smoothing them. But let's start from the beginning. You have this insert new nodes into segments. There are, believe it or not, times where you might want to add a node. Let's say on this straight path here, I wanted to add a little cut going down into it, or even on all 4 of these sides. I can highlight 2 nodes, 2 or more, and hit this plus here, insert new nodes, and that will add one directly in the middle of that path. The more I hit it, every time I hit it, it will go in between the nodes and add more nodes. So as you can see, it just continues to do that. Now, if I go back, but let's say, I wanted to add one node here because I screwed that up. I want to select this node and pull this in for whatever reason. I'm making a different shape here and want to do the same on the other side. This feature here adds a node. Did it again. Halfway in between the 2 nodes you had. So, I could change the shape of that to something like that. Okay, now I'm going to go back. Then you have this, delete selected nodes. If I highlight these 2 and hit that, that's going to delete those nodes, leaving these 2 nodes here with handles hanging out. And they're kind of, when I deleted that, it's going to Inkscape's going to want to try to maintain this shape closely. So when I delete those nodes, these handles go out close to the direction that those were in, and then I can manipulate them from there to form a new shape or whatever I'm doing. So I'm going to go back. Then you have this tool here, join selected nodes. Let me find an example. Here's one right here. I'm going to turn the fill off on this design for a second, and I'll put it, so I'll just hit this X here, turn the fill off, and then hold shift and select black. Now I have a stroke here. If you come in here, you'll see this one little node is smaller than the other nodes, and it's kind of grayed out. If I grab this and pull it, there's more than one node there. they're on top of each other. Sometimes it'll actually be a broken path there, but that's not broken. That's just two nodes sitting on top of each other. So if I select those and hit this join selected nodes, that will join them into one node. In that case, it moved it. You can also, here, let me hit Control Z. You can go back. You can hover your little cursor over that until you see it highlight red. Hit Shift J, and that will join those two nodes, and it didn't skew it and move it out of the way like it did previously. So when you're cleaning a file up, that's something to look for, is those little grayed out nodes like that. Here's one here. That, when you see that, that's either a broken path or more than one node sitting on top of each other. In these cases, those are double nodes sitting on top of each other. So you'll want to come around anywhere you see a grayed out node like that. If you hover over it, hold Shift and hit J, that now has one node there. This is also another spot where your join selected nodes can come in handy. I don't need two nodes here, and sometimes it's unclear which one to delete, which one would be best. In a case like this, I might highlight those and add a node. Oh, sorry, I hit join selected nodes. I might highlight those and add a node there. Now you see I have three. I can hover over the center one, hit J, and join them right in the middle of those two, and then smooth that out. So sometimes that inserting a new node comes in handy in those situations. Now let's see, the next tool we have here is break path at selected nodes. That can be useful if you're working with open line cuts and you have a shape. Maybe I don't want to cut this out completely as a closed path. I can come here, select say here and here. I can use this break path at selected nodes, and that will break those paths. And here's where I was talking about. I'll come in here again. It's where it's kind of better to have the fill off. If I grab this now, you can see that that path is broken. So I hit Control Z to move that back. Same deal up here where I had that highlighted. That path is now broken. So if I wanted to make open line cuts, you can break a closed path by selecting the nodes you want it, where you want to break it, and then you select this option here, break path at selected nodes. I'm going to hit Control Z and go back. Now the next tool is going to be join selected end nodes with a new segment. That would be, let me see if I can find an example where to use that. Well, let's say maybe I don't want this diamond to be a diamond. I want it to be a triangle off to the right side. I can highlight all three of those, select that, and that will eliminate that one node, and it joins those two with a new segment. So that's kind of an example of how to use that there. I'm going to hit Control Z. I'm not really sure of a great scenario offhand to give you on that particular tool, but that's one way you could use it if you wanted to. Or say here, I don't want a curve, I just want a straight line. I don't need that center node. I can use that option. I didn't straighten it out, but it eliminated the center node, and then I can use this tool here to straighten them. Well, I'll go back. Let's see, our next, make selected nodes corner. That would be, I'm gonna look on this file for a good example. Say this node here is a smooth node. Like right now, if I click either side of it, it follows each other, and I want that to be a sharp corner. If I select that node and hit that, now instead of each handle following each other, that's now a corner node where I could make that shape more like this, or And then my next is, the next tool is make selected nodes smooth. That's kind of like I've shown you. You select this node. See, that's not a smooth node, so when the torch comes over here, that's not going to be a perfectly smooth path. If I select that node and select that tool, that's now smooth, and no matter which way I move these handles, that's keeping that path right there smooth. This tool here is kind of handy sometimes, say on a circle or something like that, where I'll join these nodes by holding Shift and J. And then if I want this node to be not only smooth, but I want the handles to be an equal distance out each side so that I know it's symmetrical on both sides. If I use this, it makes it symmetric. You couldn't really see it there. I'll hit Control Z. Say this handle's like this, but I want those to be symmetrical and smooth. If I hit that, as you can see, that changed it. Now when I hold Control and pull that out, if I hold Control, it only goes straight out when I'm pulling out. If I don't hold Control, it'll kind of want to move on me. But now when I hold Control, I can move that in and out, and it changes each handle symmetrically, which is handy in some situations. This makes selected nodes auto smooth. I don't typically use that much. So honestly, to be completely honest, I can't give you a great scenario where that's handy, but that's what that tool does. So those are all the tools along through there. I pretty much never use these either, so I'm not going to cover those because it's not anything I use when making a design. So that's all your tools. Now, a couple other things that can be handy when you're editing nodes is your Align and Distribute menu, which you'll find under Object. And Align and Distribute's down here at the bottom. That will open this up over here. When you're in node editing mode, you'll have these four options over here to the right. Now when I'm in selection, your Align and Distribute menu will look like this. But when I'm in the node editing mode, I'll have these options. These can actually be very handy in certain scenarios, like say this top of this diamond's over here, but I want to make sure that this node's centered between these two nodes. If I select these and come over to this option, Distribute Selected Nodes Horizontally, that puts that node perfectly centered between these two nodes. And the same would be true if I wanted this node lined up center between these two nodes. I would select these three and use this, which is Distribute Vertically, and that will line that up perfectly centered between those two. So those are really handy. And these horizontal and vertical tools are also handy. I'm trying to find a situation on this file. I don't know if this particular path. There's not really a great scenario on this design, but if I were trying to make this line here and I want to make sure that's perfectly horizontal, you select those two nodes, hit that, and it will align those perfectly horizontal. And it's also worth mentioning, it depends on what you have here as to what it aligns with. I always use last selected, so basically what that means is if I have these two here, if I select this node first and then select that node, it will align this node to that node like that. If I select this node first and then this node, it will align that node to that node horizontally. So what you select here, you can put last selected, first selected, middle of selection I don't use, and I don't use these two, but typically I always use last select. It's just easy for me to remember. So I'm going to hit Control Z, put those back. So that's your Align and Distribute, and that can be really handy on certain files. You know, wanting to make sure your lines are vertical or horizontal, it can really come in handy. And evenly spacing out your designs or nodes can be handy too. So that pretty much covers all the general tools you'll use. If I forgot something, somebody feel free to comment and let me know. And then you're going to go around and clean files up. So like this design here, here's something I do. I don't know if it's common, but if I'm going to clean a file up, I want to maintain the design that I have here, if it was something that I liked. But like this, I don't want to lose my shapes here. So what I would do, you know, when I delete these nodes, it may skew this line. That wasn't too bad, but it could skew it where it's like this. Well, now how do I get my curve back close to where it was? So what I do when I'm cleaning a file up is I will take, and I go to stroke like this. I turn the fill off, put it in stroke, and then I will select the design, hit Control D to make a duplicate. Then I'll hold Shift and use a color like red. Now, as you can see, I have a second one here, it's red. Then I'll page that down so that that second path is right underneath my main path. Now if I click off and I go to node editing mode, now when I delete nodes, I'll have this little red guide here to go off of to pull my handles and align my paths back up where they were so that I can maintain the shapes that I previously had. That's something that I find really handy. You know, on these curves it's not changing it much, but on certain contours, like say here, you know, that might change it drastically when I delete those nodes. And you delete the nodes just by highlighting them. You know, I'll find ones here that need deleted. Say like these three nodes here. If I hold Shift, select those three, hit backspace on your keyboard. And as you can see, that's a good example of where it skewed my path pretty bad. But with that red guideline, I can get back pretty close to where it was. I mean, you could get back almost exact if you wanted, but I probably would have eliminate that. I want a nice sweeping curve. So that's one way that laying a second path under there can be really handy to help you out cleaning nodes. So you're going to want to go around. The main things I do is try to reduce nodes. Any nodes that aren't necessary I want to get rid of. I smooth my path out by manipulating these handles. Spots like this, I would probably even add a node here by double clicking on the line. Anytime you double click a line, it'll add one. And then I would highlight all three, use Shift, and then hover over till that turns red and hit J, and join those nodes there. Now I just have one node right in the corner. That cleans that line up considerably. Anytime I have nodes like this along a path that I want to keep, I want to make sure this node is smooth. That one actually is, so I'll hit Control Z. Like these, I don't think that is. See, that's not a smooth node. So I'll select those and come up here to this tool, make those nodes smooth, and now that's a nice smooth path across there. Same with these. You can kind of tell by looking at them, those nodes don't look like these nodes. So you kind of get a feel for which ones have been smooth and which ones haven't, just visually. Now those are all smooth. Now they look just a little different than they did before. So that's basically all there is to it. You know, learning these tools, play around with them and get familiar with them, and then just, you know, going around reducing, cleaning up nodes and smoothing lines. The less nodes you can get by with, the better. You know, here's a situation too where, like, adding the node, you know, do I want to go here or here? Maybe I just want to be right in the middle. I can add a node there, highlight those, Shift J. Now that landed me right dead in the middle of where it previously was, and I just have one node there versus two. So you're just going to go around and clean these designs up, make them as smooth as possible with, you know, the minimal amount of nodes. And when you're done, you'll save that as a DXF and always save as an SVG so you can come back and edit it later. And of course, when you do my little trick here of laying one path under the other, when you're completely done, you're going to want to page this down, select that red one, and backspace and get rid of that, because you don't want a double path there. So don't forget to get rid of your your red guideline path when you're done editing. And then, like this design has no open lines when you're done, you can set your fill color back on, hold shift, turn your stroke color back off, then save that and send it to your cut file, your post processor to cut. Wait a minute, hold up. There was a couple other things I wanted to discuss that I completely forgot. And these are tools that you may not use all the time, but they are handy in certain scenarios. One is when I'm in the node editing mode, I can come in and highlight, say, these 4 nodes. And maybe there are certain situations where you might want to make a detail a little bigger or a little smaller. And what you can do is you can hit your comma or your period button. This is the comma. Every time I hit the comma, as you can see, it makes that feature smaller, but maintains the shape. When I hit the period button, it makes it bigger, comma smaller, and that's a useful tool in certain situations. The other tool I meant to discuss is you can highlight those same 4 nodes, and maybe I want to rotate that feature without having to break this design apart just to turn that one feature. Your 2 keys that are braces and brackets, they'll be right to the right of your P. If you hit those, this is the one on the left, it rotates left. The one on the right will rotate that feature right. So those are just a couple little extra tools I wanted to discuss. And actually, I think too, I forgot to mention this tool here is something I use quite a lot. Make selected segments lines. Where that's handy is if, let's say, this feature here wasn't here, and I've got this spot here and it's just a straight cut right there. I like to make sure if that's supposed to be a straight line that that's actually a straight line. So if you select those 2 nodes by dragging your cursor over it, left clicking, dragging your cursor, and select that will snap those 2 handles, those 2 nodes together where that's a perfectly straight line. Because, this here, even though it may look straight, that's not really a straight line. So that tool there snaps those together. I just wanted to make sure I covered those 2. Hopefully that helps some people out. If I forgot something, feel free to let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.